Suyin, welcome. What is your cartoon character you would like to meet? Ah, SpongeBob SquarePants, an old one, yes. And
All right, and actually, just a quick check. Can everyone on Zoom hear us now? Are we good? All right, thank you.
so that is our question for the night is what cartoon character, so you can put it in the chat, who you would like to meet. So welcome one, welcome all to our May 1st Livable Sunnyvale meeting. I'm looking down on Zoom to see if we have any electeds, and I don't think so, and I don't see any electeds in the room. But I do have a thank you to Marie Bernard and Sunnyvale Community Services for hosting us again this month. Thank you, Marie. Um, oh, she said her house is our house is your house. Mikasa Sukasa. Welcome. Um, Tonight we have Allison Cigaloni here from Silicon Valley at Home. And she's going to talk about foundations of affordable housing. But I wanted just to kind of introduce her. This past Saturday at our event at Off the Rails, we hosted an event with our coalition partners to have a social. And Allison brought her mom and dad and husband. So I think I am the only one in the room who was privileged to meet her mom and dad and husband. So I just think that's great that we can connect with different people all throughout our community, and that's what we're doing at Livable Sunnyvale. I am going to give it over to Allison, who is going to share her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. Um, I was afraid that Angela was going to mention that I'm originally from Florida, which is not something I usually tell people, but I think my parents outed me on that one. Really quickly, you can see on the screen when I advance the slides that there are 62 slides there, but please don't be afraid. I will go through them very quickly. So don't be intimidated by that. It will take less than an hour, and we'll jump right in and get started. Okay, so who is SV at Home anyway? Silicon Valley at Home. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, SV at Home is a nonprofit organization, and we are advocates for bold systemic change to meet the housing needs of Santa Clara County's diverse residents. So we have a lot of policy expertise on our team. So we try to use that policy expertise and technical knowledge to win broad-based community support for evidence-based solutions to meet the housing needs of all of Santa Clara County's residents. We know that there is not a silver bullet. We didn't get into this housing crisis quickly, and we're not going to get out of it quickly. It's going to take a range of solutions that involve producing new affordable housing, preserving the affordable housing that we already have, and providing protections to our community's most vulnerable residents. We really prioritize community education and building up our area's pro-housing organizations and emerging leaders because we believe that creates opportunities for us to raise our voices together and makes us a lot more powerful. Um, so a little bit more about why we created Foundations of Affordable Housing. So this was done with a grant from our partners at Destination Home. So we created this training in response to concerns that we've heard from across our membership about a lot of misinformation, a lot of lack of understanding about what affordable housing is. People are really concerned about homelessness. They're really concerned about housing affordability and the housing shortage, but they're confused about what we mean when we talk about affordable housing. They're not seeing a connection between building more housing and addressing homelessness or housing affordability. And deeply technical definitions and explanations are not helping our cause. It's just confusing. We also find that people generally distrust government and are not sure that government is the right party to kind of solve this crisis. But they have hope that the crisis can be addressed and resolved. So we believe that having broad public support and understanding of affordable housing is critical to advancing our shared policy goals, including a big one that's coming up this fall on the ballot, which is a regional housing bond for affordable housing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. It's very difficult to ask people to support policies if they don't understand the value of what it is they're supporting. So overall, the idea of the Foundations program is to help people understand that value. So a little bit about what we'll cover today. So we'll talk briefly about the housing shortage and who is most harmed by it. We'll talk about how we got into this mess in the first place and how affordable housing helps solve our housing crisis. A little bit about the nuts and bolts of how affordable housing works, because there's a lot of misinformation about that, a lot of lack of understanding. How affordable housing benefits all of us, because people understand that it benefits the folks that live in it, but not about the measurable community benefits that it delivers across the county. And then a little more about how you can help. So diving right in, if you take a look at the chart here, you can see pretty easily that the market is not providing homes that are housing for people with lower incomes becomes so critical. So here we're looking at who can afford the average rent in Santa Clara County based on the average wage for key jobs. And it's really clear right off the bat that essential workers that our economy relies on, that we learned so much about during the COVID pandemic, can't afford to live here. You can see that a renter earning California's minimum wage would need to work more than 3 full-time jobs to afford the average rent in the county. As people are pushed out by the high cost of housing, we face worker shortages in our favorite restaurants and stores, our child care centers that support the ability of families to go to work, um, and even our doctor's offices. In the meantime, workers that are pushed out and commuting back face crippling commutes, steep prices for fuel, and add tons of greenhouse gas emissions to the air that we can't afford, just in an effort to try to earn a living and keep a roof over their families' heads. In a lot of cases, our families with low incomes are living with multiple households crowded into one apartment or facing displacement or even homelessness. So you can see here in this chart that because of policies limiting housing production, we failed to build enough housing over time. As the number of jobs in the Bay Area has consistently increased. So we want those jobs. They're important to the economy, to the vitality and the growth of our region. But at the same time, we're just not keeping up. From 2010 to 2019, we've added on average 1 unit of housing for every 7 new jobs. So this supply and demand imbalance has pushed rents up more than 75% over that time period, and the median home price up nearly 300%. I think it's actually gone from almost 300% to more than 300%. We don't have enough housing for the jobs, and that creates competition for scarce housing. So quick quiz. Let me go back one. Really quickly, what are we talking about when we say low income or extremely low income? Income level categories are determined by both the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD, and the California Department of Housing and Community Development, known as HCD, and they're adjusted to account for the median income in different areas of the country. So Santa Clara County has one of the highest area median incomes in the country and the state at $181,300 for a family of 4 in 2023. You'll note there that Santa Clara County's median income for a family of 4 has increased $30,000 just since 2021. So we know that there's an incredible amount of income inequality in our county. So that rising area median income does not reflect wages rising at the bottom end of the scale. Percentage of Santa Clara County's extremely low income residents do you think are paying more than half of their income for rent each month? Any ideas? 25%, 50%, 65%, 71%. If you're on Zoom, you can drop your answer in the chat. If you're in the room, you can just call it out. What do you think?
71.
Okay. We have some C's, some D's. Those of you who chose D are right. 71% of the county's extremely low income families are paying more than half of their income for rent. So you can see on the chart here that our housing affordability crisis impacts thousands of families in Santa Clara County. On the left of the chart, these are the renters with extremely low incomes. And you can see that they are the most cost burdened, with 71% paying more than half of their income every month for rent. So this cost burden makes it harder for low-income families to keep up with rent and utility costs, and a growing number are living one misstep away from or emergency away from eviction. A recent study from Princeton and the U.S. Census Bureau finds that people who are severely cost burdened are at a significantly higher risk of death over the next 20 years compared to their counterparts who are not cost burdened. But even a lot of folks with relatively higher incomes are suffering. And what this chart shows is that although there's a lot of need for help across low and moderate income families, different people will have different needs, and we need a range of different tools to address that range of needs. So let's take a look at who is harmed most by the affordability crisis. Affordable housing is critical to meeting the needs of our severely cost-burdened households. They're more likely than other renters to sacrifice necessities like healthy food and health care to pay the rent, and to experience unstable housing situations like evictions and homelessness. So who are the people living in extremely low income renter households? We have a lot of misconceptions about them. You can see from the pie chart here, though, that almost 40% are working in the labor force. Another 30% are senior adults, and 13% have physical or developmental disabilities. So that makes 83% of our extremely low income renter households who are people on fixed incomes or in low wage jobs. In Santa Clara County, we have more than 50,000 families with very low or extremely low incomes who rent and don't have access to an affordable home because we don't have enough of them. So how does the lack of affordability harm people? Uh, the first way is cost burden. So if you remember how many people were paying more than they could afford for rent, when people are paying 30% or 50% or more for their housing, they have to make impossible trade-offs between rent and other necessities like food or medicine, transportation to work, or shoes and clothing, especially trying to keep up with small children who grow at exponential rates. Overcrowding, faced with unaffordable housing costs, multiple families might move in together to share the rent. And overcrowding, we know, can affect mental health, stress levels, relationships, and sleep. And we that it can also make it really hard to avoid spreading illness between people who are sharing a home. Folks that are experiencing housing instability that's been shown to negatively impact children's health, development, and school performance. And generationally, this has massive impacts on educational achievement, economic output, and creating opportunities for residents to be able to fully participate in their communities. If you have a kid who's stable and showing up to school, that makes everyone in the classroom learn better. People with a stable job are paying taxes, and employers aren't having to go through the expense of training new people to come on board. There's also really good evidence around public safety that shows that stable communities are safer communities. We also have displacement. So people who have to leave a community because of a lack of housing they can afford lose family and friends. They lose social and cultural networks. They lose faith communities. They lose neighbors and networks who watch their kids so they can go to work or who help out when they're sick or injured. They could also face eviction. Almost 40% of all the people facing eviction are children. Women, and especially victims of domestic violence, face a disproportionate share of evictions as well. Nearly 300,000 families in Santa Clara County rent a home or apartment, and 20% of those renters, or more than 57,000 families, spend more than half of their monthly income on rent payments. So that means thousands of people are one small unexpected expense away from losing their housing. Also, homelessness is a housing problem. Recent research using statistics from cities and counties across the country has shown that the one single variable that can explain the rate of homelessness in a community is the cost of rent. Higher rents lead to higher rates of homelessness. A lot of the other common explanations we hear about, like drug use or mental illness or job loss or poverty, might affect whether an individual falls into homelessness, but they don't explain why some places have a lot of homelessness and some places only have a little bit. So the regional variation can only be explained by the high cost of housing. Lack of affordability also harms our environmental resilience. Our choices about how much and what kinds of homes to build have real environmental consequences. The lack of housing affordable to lower and middle income families in the South Bay is pushing people farther away. And they're driving until they can afford to live there, whether that's Tracy or Hollister or Merced and beyond. And a lot of people face grueling commutes back into the Bay Area to work. The lengthy commutes both inside and from beyond the Bay Area fuel greenhouse gas emissions. Meanwhile, potential transit riders are too spread out to be able to use the public transit we do have, and this increases the cost to cities of maintaining roads and other infrastructure. When people can afford to live close to where they work, our cities are more sustainable. We're not spending all of our revenue, municipal revenue, on trying to maintain streets. So, how in the world did we get into this mess? Um, Much of the reason for our housing shortage is rooted in government policies that were designed to keep Black, Latino, and Asian residents out. Beginning in the 1930s, the federal government used color coded maps, known as redlining maps, to rank the loan worthiness of neighborhoods in more than 200 cities across the U.S., in the large part on the basis of race. Neighborhoods with any residents of color were considered too risky for loans and were marked in red and excluded from homeownership and lending programs. As a result, residents of color couldn't get home loans, even as the suburban landscape rapidly expanded. So they were funneled into neighborhoods that then declined from deliberate disinvestment. Long after the federal government stopped using these maps, private lenders continued to use them with devastating consequences. The federal government also continued to use the same language to shape who has access to different types of federal loan programs. Policies like redlining, racial steering, and racial covenants, which prevented homeowners from selling to residents of color, were finally outlawed in California not until 1960. So that's a lot more recent than most people think. But they still persist in practice today. Each one of these headlines that you see here was pulled from something in the last 10 years. Um, so even today, lenders are charging higher interest rates or refusing home loans to Black and Latino buyers with comparable credit scores to white buyers, or they're appraising their homes at values far below comparable homes owned by white homeowners. This has made it harder for people of color to buy homes, and these homes increase less in value. And the homeownership rate among most communities of color is actually continuing to go down significantly. Even as people of color face more barriers to homeownership, ongoing illegal discrimination also makes it harder to rent. Property managers are less likely to respond to prospective Black and Hispanic tenants when they inquire about open listings. And illegal discrimination against renters with housing vouchers is also common. The racial wealth gap means it's no coincidence that 65% of all voucher holders are people of color. So, what is single family zoning and what does this have to do with anything? Single family zoning makes it hard for a community to build anything other than a single home on a single lot, which is the most expensive type of housing. That means no apartment buildings or condos or duplexes. The map you see here shows all the residential land in Santa Clara County that's set aside for single family housing in pink and for less expensive multifamily homes like apartments and condos in blue. If you squint there, how much of the residential land in your city is set aside for multifamily homes? Berkeley was the first city in the nation to adopt single family zoning in 1916 with the explicitly stated purpose of preventing Black and brown people from being able to move into some parts of the city. Single family zoning may seem race neutral, but renting an apartment or a duplex is less expensive than renting or buying a single family home. And as we've seen, government policies deliberately undermined Black and Latino wealth. The practice of single family zoning emerged in this region just as our growth was taking off driven by the rapid expanse of defense and aerospace and technology companies, at the same time as massive federal investment and growth through programs like FHA loans, the GI Bill, and VA loans, and the federal highway system. So that timing means that the region locked in these exclusionary practices and then grew within that framework. So everything new was exclusionary. And this worsened and reinforced patterns of racial injustice and segregation. You can see in the little yellow bubble there that more than 85% of Santa Clara's homes were built after 1950, so after single family zoning came into widespread use. 85%. So single-family zoning is a government policy that's helped create a shortage of housing both inside single-family zones, where limited land is at a premium, and outside single-family zones, where all the rest of us are crammed. And that has made home prices skyrocket. Just to be clear, the problem here is not single-family houses. The problem is the inability to also build the other types of homes that we need to. In the past, California's laws have often allowed small groups of existing residents to exercise disproportionate power in local decisions about what can be built and where, if anything. So this has deepened our housing shortage even further. In short, the policies that were made to keep people out have worked exactly as they were intended to. And as a result, many of our current Bay Area residents are being displaced from their homes by rising costs, no matter how hard they work. So the housing shortage and affordability crisis affects us all. And together with our federal, state, and local governments, we have a collective obligation to do better. The roots of the housing crisis are planted firmly in racial discrimination and segregation, and they reinforce segregation and discrimination. The same policies and ideas have played a key role in our housing shortage. The negative consequences of the housing shortage hurt all of us and not just the people who are struggling to find affordable housing. So how does affordable housing help solve our housing crisis? Those of you in the room may be surprised to learn that a lot of people don't see the connection between affordable housing and, and the housing crisis. But housing costs don't just affect where any single person or family is able to live, they impact the economy and the resiliency of our whole region. So for the thousands of small businesses struggling to stay afloat, to attract customers and skilled employees, making housing more affordable is critical. Safe, stable homes are the foundations for strong communities, and that means good schools, good jobs, and safe neighborhoods. These all depend on having enough affordable housing. So the definitions that you'll see on the next few slides here are some things that we've been working on with our partners that are non-technical ways that we can talk about affordable housing that help people understand what it is without having to get into AMI, percent of income paid, deed restrictions, all of these things that just either make people shut down or make them feel like this is too complicated to understand, and maybe that complexity is hiding something, right? There's this feeling of the government is not being straightforward with us. So here are some simpler, easier ways to talk about affordable housing. Affordable housing is an asset that sustains and strengthens our communities by ensuring that we all have access to a safe, stable home. Affordable housing provides a range of solutions that each address the diverse needs of local residents who can't afford the cost of housing in Silicon Valley. Affordable housing is the public's answer to address the needs of people who are harmed by our housing market. It's a bridge between our current inequitable system and a place where everyone in our community can thrive. Affordable housing doesn't just benefit the people living in it, it benefits our entire community. So we'll come back in just a few minutes to some very concrete and measurable ways that affordable housing benefits all of us. Affordable housing meets a lot of different needs. It's not one size fits all. It provides a wide range of solutions. So all of the different types of affordable homes are deed restricted, and that means they can't change to market rate rents for a minimum of 55 years. Some of them are longer, 99 years, or even the lifetime of the property. So even if a lower income renter moves out, the home will continue to serve the community, providing affordable housing to individuals and families here in Santa Clara County for decades to come. So you can see here some of the people who are served by affordable housing. Includes housing for families, for senior adults, housing for veterans, housing for adults with developmental disabilities, for survivors of domestic violence, and permanent supportive housing for folks who have experienced homelessness for extended periods of time. You can see here on the right, this picture is actually from a development here in Sunnyvale. This is Edwina Benner Plaza. We'll take a closer look at that shortly, but as I see some heads nodding, many of you probably know it's named after Sunnyvale's first woman mayor. One of the reasons that's a favorite. A lot of affordable housing developments are actually a blend of different types of homes to serve different needs. So you'll see people at different levels of affordability, families earning different ranges of income. You'll see a combination of seniors and transition-aged youth who are coming out of our foster care system and need a little bit of additional help as they're getting their feet under them, and also permanent supportive housing for formerly unhoused families. We find that just like our communities are a mix of incomes and a mix of different kinds of people, affordable housing developments work best when they also serve a range of people that reflect our community. In that range of solutions, we have a lot of mixed income developments. That's a range of rents to meet different needs. Mixed income affordable housing has individuals and families of different incomes living together in the same community. That also allows folks who can afford to pay relatively higher rents to offset some of the folks who can afford less rent. We can also see affordable housing that serves people with unique needs, bringing together people like seniors or veterans or transition-aged youth, and that helps build community and also allows developers who provide services on site to more effectively meet those needs. Affordable housing for families often includes spaces for residents of all ages to gather and children to play. So this development is close to where I live in East San Jose. This is Quetzal Gardens. This is the interior courtyard. In the back corner there, you can just see a kind of curved slide. There's a great little playground tucked back there. We also have permanent supportive housing. That's a proven solution to homelessness for the most vulnerable chronically homeless people, and it combines affordable housing assistance with critical support services to meet the needs of residents. The services there are designed to build independent living and tenancy skills and also to connect people with community-based health care, treatment, and employment services. We also have inclusionary housing. So that's a policy that requires a share of new housing development to be affordable to low or moderate income households. By including affordable housing in a market rate housing development, inclusionary housing policies promote mixed income development projects. And it tends to be successful in creating a variety of affordable housing units, usually not at super deep levels of affordability, but still those good mixed income developments in locations with strong residential real estate markets like ours. Most low-income families, you may be hearing about preservation. We're starting to hear about this come up more in conversations. Most low-income families live in homes that are not subsidized or deed restricted. These homes can be subject to rent increase. They can be remodeled and rented out at a higher cost or demolished and redeveloped. So tenants in this kind of development often face a lot of uncertainty and risk. When nonprofit organizations such as community-based developers or community land trusts purchase these properties and place deed restrictions on the units to limit rents to affordable rates and protect tenants, that's known as affordable housing preservation. So affordable housing preservation protects these residents from displacement. The picture that you see on the right here is a fourplex owned by South Bay Community Land Trust in San Jose. All right, so I'm going to zip through these really quickly because people have ideas, right, about what affordable housing looks like. This is Quetzal Gardens in San Jose that I mentioned earlier. It has 70 units, and about half of those are for formerly unhoused families. Here's the outside of Edwina Benner Plaza in Sunnyvale with 66 units for families. Here's Luna Vista in Mountain View. This is LEED Platinum certified. You'll see that a lot of, especially the newer affordable housing developments, are very environmentally friendly because that also keeps down operating costs and helps lower costs for the residents who are living there. The Veranda in Cupertino is a senior adult community, so each of these units has ADA accessible bathrooms, and there are elevators serving the second floor. I love this one too because it has little courtyards on the property, some with citrus trees, and they're set up for different kinds of activities like reading or dining. So very focused on the experience of the people who live there. We have the crossings on Monterey and Morgan Hill. Half of these units are set aside for permanent supportive housing. We have the Sobrato Gilroy apartments. The amenities include barbecue and picnic areas, on-site resident services, solar heat and energy. Shiraz Senior in San Jose. I want to ask you, if I didn't tell you these were 100% affordable housing developments, would you have guessed that from seeing them? These are beautiful places. They're high quality places. We'll talk a little bit more about why they're high quality places in a few minutes, but I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with those deed restrictions and the fact that they need to remain in service and serving the community without a lot of additional investment for between 55 and 99 years or more. So they're built with durable materials and high quality finishes, sometimes to much higher standards. Okay, I'm not doing it later, I'm doing it right now. This is exciting to me. But they're great places and great and durable lasting developments that are sometimes higher quality than those luxury places that maybe look a little shinier and are certainly renting at higher rents. So I also want to talk for a moment about interim shelter, which is different from permanent affordable housing and addresses a different need in our communities. Interim shelter units provide people who are experiencing homelessness with a short-term opportunity to get out of the elements and stabilize their lives as they transition into permanent homes. They offer more privacy, safety, and stability than unsheltered homelessness or a traditional congregate shelter. Interim shelter sites generally offer services like job placement, mental health counseling, life skills training, and assistance applying for permanent housing, which support residents as they work toward a move toward a permanent, stable home that they can afford. For a lot of residents, interim shelter units also provide a chance to recover from the trauma of living unsheltered. We also saw during the COVID-19 pandemic that the use of interim shelter units accelerated rapidly because they provided more protection for medically vulnerable residents than a traditional congregate shelter. Interim shelter is a really important new tool, but it only works as part of a system where there are enough affordable permanent homes for people to move into. In San Jose, for example, which has been kind of on the cutting edge of a lot of efforts around interim shelter, about half the people who stay in interim shelter units leave for permanent housing. And as of a 2023 study by the city, 86% of those moving on from interim to permanent housing do that with the support of permanent affordable housing. Because this is a short-term solution, it's needs to be part of a comprehensive solution that allows people a place to go from there. Otherwise, we just wind up kind of warehousing people in a different kind of location. So we can't fall into the trap of thinking we can just do interim housing for the unhoused and let the market take care of the rest. Solving the homelessness crisis requires a comprehensive approach that includes both emergency interim shelter and permanent affordable housing. So you can see here the system of response to homelessness. Each of these responses to unsheltered homelessness is necessary, and each is an improvement over surviving on the street. Congregate shelters and interim shelters are short-term parts of the system where people are unhoused, but they're sheltered. So the vast majority of residents, again, who successfully transition out of interim to permanent housing are moving into affordable housing. And that's why it's so important to make sure we don't lose sight of the need to invest in permanent affordable housing. So how does affordable housing work? A lot of misconceptions here, right? Like residents in market rate housing, families who live in affordable housing pay rent every month, but the rents they can afford to pay are often too low to cover the full cost of building, making monthly loan payments, and ongoing management for a rental property. So you can see here in our example, market rate new construction is not affordable. The challenge is that the cost of development and monthly operations, so in our example here, is about $3,600 per unit per month. Our family there on the right can afford to pay $1,800 in rent. So there's a gap there. The gap between the amount of money it takes to develop and operate a rental property and the rent revenue has to be filled in order for an affordable housing development to be completed successfully. To fill the gap, the developers usually need help in the form of a subsidy. Affordable housing is financed to be self-sustaining. This is something that a lot of people don't realize. How? How does that work? Public funding usually helps cover the costs of development from architects and engineers to construction. So that public funding comes in upfront. Since the developer is borrowing less money, they have less money to pay back every month. And that reduces the monthly cost of operating the development. So the lower rents are enough to cover the lower operating costs, making the development sustainable in the long term. Now, in some cases, to serve people with little or no income, developers will also receive a monthly subsidy from the federal government that allows them to lower rents further. So those are sometimes known as Section 8 vouchers. So the way we kind of think about this is it's closing the gap not by filling in that gap every month, but by moving the whole development down to where the folks that can pay lower rents can afford it. The gap is closed by subsidies, money that most often comes from the federal, state, and sometimes local government, but it can also come from other sources. And the subsidy, again, is used to help cover construction costs. Assistance with construction costs reduces the amount of money the developer needs to borrow, and that reduces the monthly cost of operating. So where does that subsidy come from? Developers have to put together a lot of different sources of funding to help fill that gap. They try to use the fewest number of different subsidy sources possible because every additional source of subsidy makes funding more complicated because they each come with their own requirements. To reach the lowest income families with the greatest needs, a developer is probably going to have to cobble together a lot of different sources of funding to make the project financially feasible. Again, the project can't move forward. It's not feasible unless it can cover 100% of that funding gap. So every source of funding matters. The low-income housing tax credit, or LIHTC, is the most common and usually the biggest source of subsidy. That equity, again, reduces the financing developers have to secure and allows tax credit properties to offer more affordable rents. Developers also, just like you or I, need a commercial bank loan to cover a portion of the costs. Loan underwriters have to consider a property's cash flow when deciding how much to loan. So if units are being offered to families at the lower income levels at lower rents, the developer will receive less money in the loan. You'll see other federal and state sources here. You'll see county and regional bond measures, which are important. But I want to draw your attention to the local government loan piece of the puzzle. It's just one piece, and it's a relatively small piece. But without it, everything can fall apart, right? Because we know we need that 100% to get there. Even though it's a relatively small piece of the funding puzzle, without it, the affordable housing development often can't close the gap. So that relatively small local contribution can be the critical piece of investment that makes the project work and allows the project, this is important, to benefit from a large amount of federal and state subsidy that would otherwise go to some other community. It doesn't mean our taxes get slower. It means that we don't get to reap the benefits of the federal and state benefits that are already out there to build affordable housing. If that happens, we lose the ability to leverage those resources to invest in our community. And instead of the affordable housing we need, we don't get anything. So let's get this one out of the way right up front, because we're hearing a lot of narratives, especially in the news and from some folks, about how affordable housing costs a lot to build, so maybe we shouldn't build it. We should just build enough market rate housing, and that'll probably solve our problem. So how do we address this? all housing in the Bay Area is expensive to build. It costs a lot to build here. We have high costs for land, for labor, for materials, and for financing. Affordable housing costs about 10% more to build than market rate housing. And the biggest reason for that is that in the state of California, we believe that people who build affordable housing deserve to earn the prevailing wage. We are trying to address the needs of lower income families. We're not out to create more lower income families, right? So affordable housing delivers higher wages for workers. It also delivers larger units for families than market rate developments. Most of our market rate developments are studio and one bedroom with a few two bedrooms. That's not going to meet the needs of a lot of our families that are in the community. So those more bedrooms cost more money to build. Affordable housing, as I mentioned earlier, is also built to higher development standards that protect our public investment by making sure the buildings are going to last. Affordable housing also delivers significant benefits to the public, and I'll go into that in a little more detail in just a moment. We're getting more for our money. So permanent affordable housing is also still the most cost-effective way to address the needs of people who are unhoused. So what am I talking about here? How does affordable housing benefit those of us who are not living in it? High housing prices can slow down a local economy, and that leaves jobs unfilled and less spending power in our communities. When affordable housing is readily available, more opportunities become available for people at all income levels. So let's take a look at some of the measurable economic benefits of affordable housing in our communities. You can see on the left here, every one of those blue dots is an affordable housing development that is already serving a community in Santa Clara County. The most obvious way is probably the economic benefit of an increase in discretionary spending. So the residents who are already living in affordable housing that we have here already in Santa Clara County are saving an average of $940 every month. And that is savings that can go to meet other household needs. You can see some examples there. It's money that goes right back into our own economy. For most people, rent is the biggest and most important expense every month. You might have heard the statement, rent eats first. When every month is a scramble to meet rent payments, there's no money left to spend on anything other than the most basic needs, and sometimes not even that. When residents of affordable housing communities can make their rent payments, they're able to spend more on other local purchases and go beyond the bare necessities to buy things like healthy food, have better access to health care, and spend more at their nearby local businesses. Research actually shows that the shortage of affordable housing has cost the American economy about $2 trillion a year in lower wages and lower productivity. Without affordable housing, families have constrained opportunities to increase earnings, and that causes slower GDP growth. So if you're talking to someone who's really interested in the economy, this is a great reason to invest in affordable housing. Every dollar invested in affordable housing boosts local economies by leveraging public and private resources to generate income. That includes resident earnings and additional local tax revenue and supports job creation and retention. In Santa Clara County, our existing affordable housing also reduces greenhouse gas emissions by keeping people closer to the places where they work. It saves the greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to removing 10,459 average gas-powered vehicles from our roads for a year, or more than 5.2 million gallons of gasoline, or almost 6,000 homes' energy use for a year. As I mentioned earlier, affordable housing developments are often also leaders on environmentally friendly and cost-saving measures like energy efficiency and LEED certification. We also have huge public health savings. A healthier population means a healthier economy. Among other factors like income and education, housing dramatically influences a person's physical and mental well-being. The most obvious way is the quality of the housing itself. If people are living in lower cost housing that's poorly constructed or maintained, they could be exposed to lead paint or water contamination and a slew of other environmental risks that are far less likely for more affluent populations. These environmental threats lead to chronic health issues for children and families and seniors that come at huge and preventable cost to both the residents and their greater communities. When a person's home is unaffordable, other critical health factors like healthy foods and doctor's visits also become further out of reach. How do you exercise if you're working those 3 full-time jobs to keep a roof over your head? When people have access to quality, affordable housing options, they're far less likely to face environmental threats and more likely to have enough income for healthy food options and routine medical care. And that ultimately helps them lower the risk of severe chronic health problems. So we also benefit because more affordable housing creates more job opportunities, and that happens in a couple of different ways. Not only does the construction of affordable housing create well-paying jobs that don't require a college degree, affordable housing also supports the essential workers that our economy relies on. As our local economy has struggled to recover from the pandemic, one of the greatest obstacles has been a worker shortage in jobs like childcare, grocery stores, healthcare, and a lot of local small businesses. A lot of lower wage families have had to leave the Bay Area, driven out by the high cost of housing. Affordable housing strengthens our economy by providing stable and accessible homes for all our community members. So that supports every year in Santa Clara County, the existing affordable housing that we have supports 21,480 jobs and generates more than $840 million in wages and business income. Most importantly to me, and I know to many of you, affordable housing also improves the lives of residents and all those ways that residents are harmed if they don't have access to housing they can afford. So affordable housing helps relieve the impossible choices that come with cost burden, helps relieve overcrowding, housing instability, the health, educational, and employment impacts of housing instability, helps prevent and reduce displacement and eviction. So I love this quote. We as a country always act like we can't find the money to solve the home affordability crisis, which implies that we're not spending it now. We are spending it now. We're just spending it on adverse health and bad outcomes. So, how can you help? So, one of the biggest ways is to help tell the story of how we benefit. Support affordable housing in your community and tell your local elected officials. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, including an elected official or two. You can also support additional sources of funding for affordable housing. So, some of the biggest barriers that we see to the production of affordable housing is that we don't have enough resources to go around and people don't understand the value of affordable housing. So, those are the two things that we're really trying to work on here today. So, I mentioned the affordable housing bond measure that's going to be on the ballot in November. It's going to bring between 10 and 20 billion dollars to the region for affordable housing. These are regional funds that help address this regional need at a regional scale because we know people's lives don't stop at county boundaries. People cross them every day to get to work, to visit their families, to do the things they need to do. This can produce and preserve more than 45,000 affordable homes. Here in Santa Clara County, we've had Measure A over the last 7 or 8 years now that's done a brilliant job of producing affordable housing. But it's a little bit of a drop in the bucket compared to what we really need. And many of the other counties in the 9 county Bay Area region have not had something similar at the same time. So we need to address this in a coordinated way to be able to have a real impact. In terms of funding, what this means is for Santa Clara County, between 1.2 and 2.4 billion dollars in resources with an additional 1 to 2.2 billion in San Jose. I know we're not in San Jose, but this is important because sometimes the largest city in the area can kind of pull in a lot of the resources. This is specifically designed to make sure that San Jose gets its own tranche of funding to help address their RENA of 62,500 units. And there's still plenty left over to work with other cities in the county. I also want to point out, we talked about local funding being able to leverage region, state, and federal funds. So this money is not just 10 to 20 billion dollars. Each dollar of this also allows us to leverage more state and federal funds. So we get the benefit of that money as well as the bond. That was abrupt. I thought I had another slide in there. So we can move on to questions. I know the bond, SV at Home and Working Partnerships USA are listed there at the bottom. Our organizations are actually co-leads on the Affordable Housing Bond Measure. So we are working at this point. There's no language for the bond measure yet. So what we're letting people know about is this opportunity that's moving through our regional government right now. It's making great progress. They're working on some solutions around labor standards and making sure that the money that's coming in through the bond measure, when that bond measure passes, as we know that it has to, because we need it so badly, is also addressing the needs of the workers who are working on it. We're really proud to be involved in this and excited about it. We are expecting to have the ballot measure language in June. And at that point, that campaign is going to transition to our action fund. And it's going to transition to a lot of work, phone banking and door knocking and all those things that I know many of you have some experience into. Right now, we want to make sure that people understand about it and understand about the need for the resources and the value of what those resources can deliver. So with that, I'll switch over. Okay, so the question is the bond measure just for Santa Clara County or for the Bay Area? So this is Bay Area wide. So the bond measure will bring $10 billion to $20 billion across the 9 counties of the Bay Area. So the amount that was listed on that slide is Santa Clara County and San Jose's share of the regional bond measure. Great question.
Following up on Margaret's question,
Mhm.
what? Oh, thank you, thank you. I'm wondering. I have a lot of questions because I feel like I need to be updated on some of these things.
Okay.
But I'll start with the end, which is the bond measure. And I'm wondering, Measure A. I can't recall the exact years that it happened, but
Mhm.
we had the bond measure pass, and we didn't see any money here in Sunnyvale. We saw no new developments. And every year I'm saying, hey, where have you applied for this money? When are we going to get to see some affordable housing? And I think at the very end of the period, we got one affordable housing project that was partially funded through the county money. So my point being that this breaking out of San Jose from the county sounds like a really good idea, because the county is about, what, San Jose is about half the population of the county, and Sunnyvale gets shoved under the rug a lot. But now, since we have the council that we have, I hope we can be, much more proactive and in securing some of that money for Sunnyvale. Do you know if do you know what's your prognosis on the bond measure and how that will sort out for the smaller cities?
So one of the things that is required, so the kind of structure for this bond measure was enabled by some legislation that was passed in 2019. You may have heard this called the BAFA bond. So BAFA is the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, but that legislation put some guardrails on what this process looks like. One of the major guardrails that's really reassuring to me is that each county and each recipient city has to create an expenditure plan, and that expenditure plan has to follow thresholds for housing production. So there's a minimum amount for housing production. I'm getting to the answer of your question too, I promise. A minimum amount for housing preservation, and then there's some flexible funding that can go to preservation or housing production. Those expenditure plans, in order to be approved, have to be created with stakeholder engagement with every city in the county. So that means that Sunnyvale is at the table. That means all of our other local jurisdictions are at the table before any money ever gets dispersed. Sunnyvale's needs are considered. I will say that it's been pretty clear in the conversations that we've had so far with both the regional agency, which will retain about 20% of the funds to apply at a regional scale and also with the local counties, that the cities that are leaning in are prepared to are going to be well prepared to access more of this funding. There is a level of commitment to work with the cities that are prepared to work with both the region and the county. I am also encouraged by your council and the council's priorities. I think that there's a lot of great programs in the housing element that are exciting and that can lead to the production of a lot more affordable housing. I think that a lot of the answer is to lean in early and often, but that expenditure plan, the county is accountable to it. And the expenditure plan has to follow those guidelines that were set in the legislature.
Are you giving this presentation to councils all over?
I am not alone in giving this presentation. So there's a lot of this that we have. This is, I think, maybe my 8th or 9th iteration of this. We're also rolling out just a presentation for elected officials on the affordable housing bond. The BAFA itself is rolling out lots of these. There are lots of these presentations given at regional meetings. So at this point, Patrick, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Are your eyes beginning to cross when you hear about the regional affordable housing bond measure? So there, our elected officials are hearing lots about this. So
That's good.
yes.
I don't want to take up all the time. Somebody else wants to ask questions. I can ask some later.
Sure. So there's a question from Scott. It says San Jose has about half the county population. Why is San Jose's share of the regional bond so high?
So the legislation laid out in an effort to make sure that we don't have a situation where the largest cities in the region kind of gobble up all the funds, but also acknowledging that those cities have a very large share of the RENA. It is the funding to recipient cities is distributed in accordance with the low income RENA. Regional housing need allocation. So that is each city's share of affordable housing to meet the needs of their low-income residents and to accommodate growth of low-income families. So it's set at that level to address the number of units that the city is accountable for planning for over the course of the next now 7 years of the planning cycle.
All right, Tanisha, I'll jump in. I had just a random question about affordable housing, not about the bond. So in the examples you were talking about, for an apartment, is the rent for those fixed or does that depend on who applies for it? So like the example you had, there was an apartment that was like $1,800. Would that be $1,800 for anyone that rented it, or do they adjust the rent based on the income of whatever family happens to be renting?
So the short answer is it depends. So it kind of depends on the source of funding. A lot of those units are going to be set aside for people in a particular income range. So it's not necessarily going to stay at $1,800. The rent can increase over time as long as it's tied to that same percentage of the area median income. So we're a little in the weeds there. But if a unit is set aside for a family earning up to 60 to 80% of the area median income, it will continue to serve families that are earning that range of the median income. It's a little different if someone has a Section 8 voucher, then the rent is just pegged to 30% of their income. And it's not tied to the area median income. So it can vary a little bit.
Okay, hold on one second. I will say to all our informed guests, this is being recorded, and will you share the presentation?
Sure. Mhm.
Sure, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you so much, Allison. If we wanted to support the bond, where can we go to find more information and support the campaign?
What a fantastic question. So first of all, feel free to email me or anyone else at SV at Home, but you can also go to bayareahousingforall.org, particularly if you are an elected official. So I know they're really, it's important as leaders in the community to demonstrate that there is support from elected officials. So there is a list of elected officials who have endorsed the bond in concept, because we don't have bond measure language yet, right? But have endorsed that need for additional funds for affordable housing. So we are gearing up at SV at Home Action Fund and Working Partnerships USA, which is also Silicon Valley Rising is the C4 arm of that, to kind of get into a big campaign. So, but please, for now, I would also encourage you on Friday, if you are not registered already, I will share a link. May is Affordable Housing Month. I didn't have a slide in there. I'm disappointed myself. May is Affordable Housing Month, and we have all kinds of programming, both from SV at Home and from all of our partner organizations. I think Angela is trying to correct my oversight there and share that with you. But our inaugural event on Friday is going to be what we're calling the housewarming. And the topic of the housewarming is the regional bond. So we invite you to join us at Open San Jose. There will be lots of tasty food there and a lot of great information about the bond measure. Would you like to share that? Okay,
Yeah,
we'll
so
share
I'll
that
just-
with you. Thank you, Angela.
I can. So yes, there is the housewarming that Allison was speaking about, and we also have, Chuck, do you want to talk about what else is coming?
Yeah, I have a little slide in a minute.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, there's an event next week. I'll have a slide with the information on that in just a minute. So one of the affordable housing activities is actually happening right in Sunnyvale downtown. We just opened up a brand new 100% affordable housing complex called Meridian. It's right across Matilda from some of the city line and all the other developments that are going up downtown. So it's right downtown. And they're going to be doing an open house next week. And we'll get to all the details when I have that slide.
Oh, I don't think I have it yet. Gail has asked, what happens if the bond fails in the county?
That's a great question. And the answer is that the bond measure needs to pass across the 9 counties. So even if it fails in one county, if there is enough support for it to pass across all 9 counties, it passes. But this is why Santa Clara County is so important, because we have more population than any other county. So that has made the region very responsive to the concerns of folks in Santa Clara County. In terms of crafting the region's bond measure, which is great, very exciting. But it also means that we're really important. It's really important to raise the level of support in Santa Clara County so we can get this across the finish line.
So I had a question about first of all, about the bond measure. My first reaction was it's not enough, because we know construction costs have gone way up. It's not, for Santa Clara County, it's not that different from the Measure A, which was a number of years ago. And I mean, just intuitively, if you say, well, it costs $1 million per housing unit, then you're talking about 1,000 units. Now, I'm sure it's spent differently, and I'm sure there was a lot of focus groups and everything going on, figured out what would likely pass. So not going to debate that. Obviously, we need a lot more money, but this is certainly, you know, I'm sure we will all be supporting that. Another question about affordable housing, though, is we're seeing a lot of townhouses in Sunnyvale now. The new developments being proposed, a lot of townhouses. Of course, ownership is important. We want to do that, but what the staff has told us is that The reason for that is for ownership, the inclusionary requirement is just what 50% affordable, whereas rental has specific requirements for low and very low, uh, uh, housing, which of course requires more subsidy, so that basically they can make more money from an ownership uh, uh, project than for a rental project. Um, is that consistent with your experience? And maybe it's specific to Sunnyvale.
So each city kind of structures their inclusionary ordinances in different ways. Inclusionary ordinances don't generally receive subsidy though, which is why they generally don't produce very low and extremely low income, a large quantity of very low and extremely low income units. They usually work best for producing moderate income units. If they are going to produce low or very low, then usually the percentage of units is pretty small. And that's because if that's set too large, it's just going to stop the development altogether from moving forward. In terms of the distinction between rental and homeownership, I'm not sure on that. I wouldn't want to hazard a guess. I do want to address what you said earlier, though, about units costing $1 million a unit for affordable housing. So if you remember all those sources of funding that get cobbled together, the way that the local funding gets broken out is that it's actually a fairly small amount. So in San Jose, recently, the city of San Jose has something called Measure E, where the city provides funding for affordable housing to help close that gap. So there's been a lot of discussion in San Jose about whether or not we can afford to spend $1 million a unit. Um, the truth is that the city spends less than $150,000 a unit. And when you look at the per bedroom costs, it's actually a little below $70,000 per bedroom, if you want to think about it that way. So that local money, which would also be the same with the regional money, gets broken into lots and lots of little tiny pieces. We're not paying $1 million for each unit. We're paying a little tiny percentage of that because the developer is still cobbling together all of those other sources. So that allows us to take that regional money and leverage it to access all those other sources. So it does go pretty far. Measure A has produced, let's see, I was just looking at the latest update. Close to 5,000 units of affordable housing. The estimate for the bond, and there's some different ways this functions, the 20% that's staying at the regional level, the region is actually using a model that was kind of piloted by the New York City Housing Authority to use some of that in a revolving loan fund that will allow BAFA to function as a public bank so that the interest that is repaid on loans gets reinvested instead of going to pay off shareholders at a private bank. So as I mentioned, the developers are going out for those commercial loans. When they repay a commercial loan at a private bank, that interest goes to shareholders. It doesn't get reinvested in the community. If that money is held by a public organization like BAFA, then it goes back into the regional housing need and continues to be reinvested. So a few ways that that regional bond money both is different and really gets leveraged to build a lot more than it might immediately appear to over time and using other sources of funding as well.
Great, thanks. Yeah, every $1 billion helps, so.
Better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick.
I apologize. I had a question. On one of your earlier slides, when you were talking about like the shared living space, the short-term residential thing, you said half of the folks that arrived found permanent housing. What happens to the other half?
At So there's some different, I don't have the full data here. It is in the update from the community plan to end homelessness. So I can forward that along. I'll make a note of that. Um, so some of them are still there in the interim housing that's designed to be a temporary solution. Some of them have left the area. Some of them have fallen back into homelessness. Some of them have moved in with friends or family. A large percentage of them are still there in the interim housing. And this is why you can see it's important for this to be able to function as the short-term solution that helps people move from one place into another. It can't do that if we're not able to move people out beyond that with the permanent affordable housing.
So is the primary reason that they're sort of still staying in the temporary area because there isn't sufficient permanent housing space, or are there other factors involved?
Um, there are multiple factors, but there are not enough vacant units to move all of those folks into immediately.
Okay, and I'm wondering if
It's
these are
certainly
like,
not the only factor. I mean, there's
yeah,
also the fact that they need to be stabilized enough to be able to do that. They need to apply. In many cases, they're on a wait list.
mhm.
So the availability is not there. For some folks, there may be other issues as well. So I don't want to oversimplify that.
Yeah, and I was wondering, since most of the stories involved family units rather than individuals, I was wondering if the people who were still sort of in that limbo, as it were individuals without family units, because obviously family units get priority um, as opposed to singletons.
So right now we have more single units in our affordable housing stock in Santa Clara County than we do units for families. We have more one bedroom and studio and two bedroom than we do large family units. So in terms of who, kind of the demographics of the folks who are still there, I don't have that at the tip of my finger, so I don't want to hazard a guess at it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Hi, Allison. First of all, I'm going to have to see if Sunnyvale Community Services has renewed our membership in SV at home, because we were members. We'll have to see. We've been a little bit busy here. But just a couple of things. We are managing the city's tenant-based rental assistance program, TBRA. We have over 40 families enrolled right now. And 5 out of 6 of those families, all of them were or had been homeless, some for a day, some for years, but they were all unhoused when they enrolled. And 5 out of 6 of those families were moved out of Sunnyvale. So they started here, but we've had to move them someplace else, because after 2 years, they have to be able to sustain their rent. And the most affordable places for them, and in most of these cases, are not here in Sunnyvale because of the lack of affordable housing in a range. So even a couple of $100 difference, as you pointed out, really matters to a family that is just trying to pull themselves out of being unhoused and to sustain it for 2 years. And they're getting wraparound case management. They're getting help finding the housing. But we also are worried that after 2 years, there is no housing if that doesn't work, if they're not able to get their income up to then sustain it at the market rate that they're paying. If we were able to find them affordable housing, that's a miracle. And sometimes they move, being one place to another. And I'm so grateful to Mike for being on our planning commission. He's our secret weapon there, I think. But the few times that I've been on the planning commission, I'm overwhelmed by how much talk there is about a family who wants to put a second story on the house, and relentless meetings after meetings after meetings. And I'm sitting there going, why are we spending all of this time on a zoning issue that is family to family, pitting people against each other? And there's so little time spent on this bigger issue of helping all of us. And I'm just overwhelmed by how difficult it is. and what our city staff and our city council, there's a disconnect. The city staff has to spend time on all of these minutia for single family to single family, or a duplex next to a single family. And it seems like we're just digging ourselves in. And I know that happens in other areas as well. So I think we want to support. First of all, I think I want to get our board to understand, our Sunnyvale Community Services Board to understand. Paulina is there with our community leaders. She's on the board of Livable Sunnyvale, but also is the person who is leading our community leaders who care about this. So we want to galvanize support for this. This is a hope for us to be able to get the money. Sunnyvale always complains that we don't get the share. One of the issues is that when there is any county money or state money, then suddenly Sunnyvale, Sunnyvale Council feels like they lose any control about getting anybody locally in. So, because people who started in Sunnyvale would like to stay here. And that's always been an issue. I know of Sunnyvale says, well, if the county gets money in there, then we're going to lose any say in how it gets built and who gets to build it and who gets to stay there. So that regional approach hopefully will overcome some of that. If you've got any hints about how we can galvanize the community here, what you're talking about, your whole presentation is one. These are questions I get asked all the time. I don't have the slide deck, and you're an amazing presenter. So I think we've got to get this out there to tell this story. We've got lots of individual stories here, lots of experience keeping people housed with subsidies one time, 6 months, 2 years, but after that, it doesn't work. And finally, how is UBI factoring in guaranteed basic income? Because to close that gap until you build it, can there be a way of saying, well, some families are going to get $1,000 a month in order to bridge their gap of their income? It doesn't have to be prescribed that they spend it on rent, but you give them another $1,000 a month, say, and that will enable them to afford something close to market rate, maybe.
So first of all, thank you so much for your work and the work of your organization. There was a lot in what you just said, so I'm going to try to respond to as much of that as possible. First of all, I want to validate your frustration in hearing Planning Commission and Council. Sometimes it feels like the things that they're discussing around development are not the things that are most central to us and most important. I know that's frustrating. I do want to give you some hope in that part of the reason for that is all of the state legislation that's passed in the last few years streamlining affordable housing development such that it doesn't go to Planning Commission and Council anymore because it was getting hung up there. In general, affordable housing is approved at the staff level and it doesn't have to go through a discretionary process anymore. As long as it complies with the general land uses and zoning. Universal basic income. I'm a huge fan. The state of California's constitution does not allow general obligation bond measures to be used for anything other than capital acquisition, real estate acquisition, and capital improvements. So unfortunately, until we are able to pass a constitutional amendment that does allow that, the bond can't be spent for that. But possibly what the bond can do is free up funds to be able to address the needs for services and support. I am also given hope by the pilots that we're seeing around universal basic income that demonstrate how well it works when you trust families who are lower income to know what they need best and to be able to spend that money wisely. We have, I'm going to climb up on my soapbox for just a moment and then climb right back down. We have this idea in the United States of this meritocracy. If you have money, it's because you've earned it and you deserve it. And if you don't have money, it's probably because you've made bad decisions. we know that's false. We know that we've set up a system that benefits some people and harms others, and that each of our families knows their needs better than anyone else does. And so universal basic income allows them to make those decisions. I'm a huge fan. Um, let's continue to work for bold systemic change as we are doing the best we can to function within the system that we have right now as well. Um, you said so many things. I feel like there's more that I have not addressed. Thank you for saying I'm a good presenter. I really appreciate that. This is a road show. Part of the reason that we're so delighted to work with our partners to get out there is to be able to talk to and reach people that we might not ordinarily get the opportunity to be in front of. So I really appreciate you all letting me be here with you tonight. It's a privilege for me. Thank you. I think we
I just want to thank you for all the beautiful work you're doing. And I I listened to this presentation as someone who lived in really difficult places, and and the thing you said that really struck me was that the places are beautiful. I think that's something important to lift up, to name that not as just an economic investment of the durability of these buildings, but these people deserve to live in a beautiful place. And it's human dignity, it's love. And of course, I'm a pastor, so I'm speaking about it in this way, but I think that's very compelling, not just the economics of it, but that we are doing this because we respect the dignity of people. And part of that dignity is to be around beautiful things and to live in a beautiful place and to have a place of belonging. So I want to encourage you to name that for other people, that it's okay to do this because of love. and and I'm really grateful for your work in it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that that is very valid and very valuable. I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't have any problem adding that. This is an iterative process and it changes a little bit each time. So I am happy to include that and I agree with you. You have a question?
Did that work? Yeah, okay. Um, so I'm just trying to pick out a couple here. I'm curious, community land trusts and other forms of people getting together to raise money. What's your update on those trends?
I'm so glad you asked. So in the Bay Area, we have some areas that have really well developed community-based developers and community land trusts, especially in San Francisco and the East Bay. Here in the South Bay, we don't have very much of that. But we have people who are interested in doing that. Um, one of the programs that Silicon Valley at Home is doing is working with those organizations that are including South Bay Community Land Trust, but also the School of Arts and Culture at Mexican Heritage Plaza, the Mountain View Solidarity Fund. So there are different organizations that are interested in doing that kind of work. This is especially important because 15% of the bond money is set aside, a minimum of 15%, for affordable housing preservation. And often that is what the community-based developers and community land trusts are really interested in doing. Purchasing the places that are more affordable now, but that are not deed restricted, and preserving them as deed restricted housing to protect the families that are living in them. Often these places need a lot of rehab because they are older. So, they need that investment not only for the purchase, but to make sure that the quality and the habitability and the beauty is all there. So, so there is a real need for that in the South Bay, and we're working to try to build up the infrastructure to do that before we get to a point that the funds are distributed.
No, okay, it's working now. Actually, there was one more question. I think we did this a little bit earlier, but on the chat, are we able to share the presentation? With everyone?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah,
I will
so,
send it to you. It is unwieldy as a PDF. It's massive, but I will send you a link that you can share and view all the slides.
okay, yeah, so we'll send that out to if you're on our mailing list and got the announcements for this, we'll send that out to the mail list.
If you have other people that you want to see this, we're rolling it out again on May 30th in San Jose. It will also be at Open San Jose, and it will be followed by a Happy Housers social with lots of good and free food and beverages. So you can roll it all up into one if you would like to come. I would love to have you join us. Free food is always good.
Maybe we'll take one more question. Yeah, one more question.
The housing tax credits,
Yes.
they took a nosedive. I don't know the exact years, but that was one of the reasons that we were told that we were having trouble with financing, was because the tax credits for getting the pool of money together, the people who would receive the tax credits for developing weren't getting tax credits anymore, or they had been cut very, very steeply. I don't know if they got reinstated, or do you know the history of what's going on there?
So tax credits are a large portion of the tax credits, not all of them, but a large portion of the tax credits are competitive. So developers have to choose, have to create developments. This gets very complicated, that align with all the criteria that the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee has established for that year. The projects are then scored against each other, and the top ones are awarded the tax credits. So it is less a function of there being fewer tax credits, and this is on the positive side, more a function of we have a pipeline of affordable housing developments that are ready to go but need the resources to be able to move forward. So that is both a frustration and also kind of a source of hope. It means that we have the infrastructure and the ecosystem there to move this forward if it's well resourced. There is also, and I'm going to speak very high level on this because I don't have all the details. So there's two different types of tax credits. A little in the weeds here. If you're not into the weeds, you don't have to listen. There's 9% tax credits and 4% tax credits. The 4% tax credits you're awarded if you have also qualified for, you're awarded them automatically if you've also qualified for public bonds, state bonds. However, 50% of your project costs have to be financed with the bonds in order to qualify for those tax credits. At the federal level, they're trying to lower what they call the 50% test so that they can stretch out those bonds. They can award the bonds to more developments because maybe they only need now 25% of the project costs covered. And that will allow those 4% tax credits to go further. So there's things that are moving at the federal level that we expect will likely move forward that could also be really helpful in freeing up some additional tax credits that will help us to better leverage the regional bond funds as well.
All right, and then one last comment. We talked about this a little bit ago. If you'd like to actually come out and see what an affordable housing development looks like, talked about how they're beautiful, high quality developments. There's a brand new one. It opened a week or two ago, I think it was, right in downtown. So if you're driving up Matilda North, it's on the left, kind of across from where it'd be like Target, then there's City Line, then there's Matilda, and then there's Meridian, which is the new affordable housing development. So it'll be next Thursday at 11 a.m. So Thursday, May 9th at 11 a.m. Everyone is welcome to come out. They're asking to please RSVP. There's an email address, lpearlstein@related.com, so they know how many people to expect and how many people to plan. Oh, pardon, was there something? Oh, yeah, and I'll paste all of that into chat as well, and we'll also be sending that out over email. So yeah, if you'd like to come see one of these developments, literally it just opened up in the last week or two, and they're very excited to show it off to everybody. All right, I'll turn it back over to Angela.
So that was also in the email blast that announced this meeting, so you would probably see it. I just wanted to say thank you to Allison. When she proposed this to me several months ago, she's like, you will learn something. And I wish you could see the notes that I took, because I was like, oh, I didn't know that, I didn't know that, I didn't know that. And it wasn't just the statistics. There was more in there that colors the whole picture of what we're looking at, and I think Marie said it, will help us galvanize our community so that we can get this over the finish line. And I think Marie also said we do need bold systemic change. This certain things that have happened that we have continued to let happen and thought, oh, the market will correct. As Livable Sunnyvale, we know that is not true, so we need to correct when we can. So thank you for your time and your work and your organization. Thank you. Just, I think there was a few announcements. Chuck just talked about what's coming up next. We're trying to plan our June meeting, so I'll let Agnes just have a plea there. There will be letters that we send out next month. We did not send out any this month, so stay tuned for that. And I'll let Agnes go about a plea for some ideas for next month. Do you want to do that or no? So if you have ideas or concerns for our next month, we do have some ideas we're thinking about. Maybe we'll go back to aging, maybe some more housing or some more village centers, but it'll be something. And then Chuck was going to talk about the other latest, the budget with Sunnyvale, if you want to announce that.
So one other upcoming event, the Sunnyvale City Council will be having their budget workshop on, actually, I've lost the sheet of paper. I had it written down. I believe it's May 23rd. So the budget workshop is where they kind of make a lot of the big budget decisions, which study issues get actually funded, which ones they don't have the funding available for. So it's an all-day workshop at the end of May, and we will send out some more information about that with the specific dates. Thank you.
And anybody on Zoom have any announcements that they would like to share with our community? That's an in the room announcement. I don't see any hands. Okay. So at this point of the meeting, we're going to pivot just a little bit. Every 2 years or every year, our board changes. When we did our bylaws many years ago, we staggered our board. So last year, let's see, Paulina, Agnes, and Angus were re-upped for 2 years. So at this time, this year, there were 5 open board seats. Mine, Chuck's, Leia's, Gail, and Mike Cerrone. Um, at this point, I have heard from Gail and Leia that they will not continue, and I wanted to and extend a ton of gratitude for the two of you for the work that you have done on the board. Um, when I spoke at when we received Nonprofit of the Year and I spoke, I talked about Stone Soup, and basically we need everybody, and everybody has a gift. And I truly appreciate Leah and Gail for the gifts that they have given. I'm amiss, I don't know how long. I think Leah's been on the board 2 years, but Gail, you might have been from the beginning, 10 years ago. I don't know. So thank you for all your years of hard work. And at this point, we need to vote for the next board members. So I'm going to turn it over to Agnes because since I am terming out tonight and hope to term back in, it'll go over to Agnes to lead it. So thank you.
Thank you, Angela. So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about what our board does for those of you who do not know. Currently, we have 2 board meetings a month, and the reason I say currently is because when we elect our new board, there's always the possibility that we will change how often we meet. But one thing that more than likely, well, I shouldn't say more than likely, one thing that will not change is that we are a working board. So what we do is we plan all of the monthly meetings. We meet with city council. We try to solicit additional members. So it is a lot of work. So I can't say that it's not, because it is, but it's also a lot of fun work. So as Angela said, that we have 3 board members that are looking to continue in their positions, and each of them is going to talk with you for about a minute about why they want to continue, and we will hold a vote. But before we hold the vote, we need to know, is there anyone that is attending this meeting that also has an interest in being considered for our board? So if you could raise your hand, your virtual hand, or if there's anyone in this room that is eligible. And to be eligible to join our board, and I have this written down because I could not remember this, a member has to have filled out and returned a membership form, and the member must have attended two of the following in the past 6 months: either a general meeting or an event at which attendance is recorded and which the board has declared at least 72 hours in advance will count for vote eligibility. So that basically means committee meetings. If you've attended those, or if you've attended a general meeting, then you are eligible, and also if you've completed an application. So is there anyone in the room that would like to be considered for a board position that meets that criteria? Going once? Yes, that is also true. We do have a handy list. No? Okay, is there anyone online that would like to raise your virtual hand? Boy, we are going to be small and mighty again in 2024 to 25. Okay,
As long as there's a quorum, that's all that's needed.
yeah, so, okay. So we're going to start, first of all, we're going to go alphabetical by first name. So we'll start with Angela. So if you would like to tell us why you want to continue.
I might redo my same speech when Richard Mellinger asked me to be on this board. Several years ago, Richard called me and said, "Do you want to be on the board?" And it was in the middle of COVID. But anyway, what I knew about the board from attending meetings was an incredible amount of knowledge in the room. What I've noticed beyond that knowledge is a passion that I didn't see when I was just kind of on the periphery. So I would like to continue on the board for those 2 reasons: the passion to all for the greater good and the knowledge that's in the room. One of my dreams, I think I've said it about Livable Sunnyvale, is to outreach more and educate more. I mean, in so many events, like some of our last month's meeting about the Village Center, there were people that said, I had no idea that was happening. My dream is that someone would say, I heard about it. I heard about it from Livable Sunnyvale, or go to this group. They know what's going on. Ask them. So that's what my dream is, and that's why I want to stay on the board. Thank you. Chuck would be.
Harder, betcha. I can use this one if I can do the video at the same. Oh, nope, I cannot do two things at the same time. Sorry. All right. Yeah, so I'm Chuck Fraley. I've been on the board for 2 years now. And the main thing I'm interested in is trying to make housing in Sunnyvale more affordable. So we've done a lot of work over the past couple of years, working on the housing element, working on trying to get more housing at the village centers and kind of across Sunnyvale. And I'd like to kind of continue that work. We've started looking at the village centers as well, looking at the retail components, trying to make sure that we also get the retail that we need, in addition to the housing that we also need. And I'd appreciate everybody's vote so I can continue as one of the board members. Thanks.
And last but not least, Mike Cerrone.
Yeah, thanks. I've been on the board since the beginning, and with Gail stepping down, I guess I'm the last person standing of that cohort, but if you can call it standing, but still. Uh, so, and Obviously, uh, I think what we do uh, is important, does make a difference. We do a lot of educational events. We hold to inform people about things like the village center as an example. There's a lot of other things. We'll certainly be highlighting this bond measure. Um, we spent a ton of time on the housing element, uh, but that also serves a function. When the city takes an action in the housing elements, an example, or the Moffett Park specific plan, which is another thing we were very involved in. They reach out. Part of their charter is to do outreach, right, to talk to the community. So, and we are part of the community. So, we provide at least somewhat informed sounding board for what they are proposing. So, I think we work with many other organizations, as was uh, manifested by the social event that we had in Sunnyvale this weekend with many other regional organizations advocating for affordable housing. Um, so it's a privilege to be able to contribute, and that's why I've been doing it.
So before we start the vote, I want to mention, which I neglected to earlier, is that we do have additional board seats that are available, and we will continue to look to fill them throughout the year. So if you're wavering now and you think you would like to join the board, there will be opportunity to do that. And you can just let one of the board members know if you have questions. You can certainly ask us, and we're happy to talk with you about why we're on the board and what we like and maybe what we want to change. So, Leah, are you going to then conduct the actual voting process in the ballots? Oh, okay. Okay, but before we do this, I've just been reminded of yet something else I have forgotten. So, see what happens when you're a board member. Um, we also would really like your help joining some of the committees that we have, because we can't do this on our own. And we need your input into what you think would make the city better, what we're doing that you think would make Livable Sunnyvale better. So when we send out a call for committee members, such as we've done for Moffett Park that Gail headed, as well as El Camino Real, we really would like your input and your participation. Now, is there anything else I've forgotten so that we can get on with the vote, since I've forgotten a lot tonight? Okay, hang on. Leia's saying something, but she has no mic. Just a minute. We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by. It says, sorry, there's a problem with this file. Please reload. I can't send it to Paulina to print out for the in-person attendees. I can't get into my file. Says I opened it yesterday. There.
Yeah, and one other thing, there was a question, you might not know if you're eligible to vote. There was an email that went out, I believe, this morning or possibly yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing something Leia is supposed to do. Oops.
So if you received an email from Paulina yesterday, and you are attending the meeting today, and then you are eligible to vote. If you did not receive an email, you are not eligible to vote. We will still check the name, since this form does collect emails, we will be checking the names of the people who complete the form once I can finally paste it into the chat. That and against our list of eligible people. So obviously we're going to discount those of you who might accidentally vote who are not eligible. So again, bear with me, technical difficulties here.
You mentioned if you had any ideas about things to do.
Actually,
For some time, I've been thinking about, oh, oh, yeah, I guess there's some people there. Hello, yeah. I've been thinking about accessibility issues for some time now, especially since I had a joint replacement and couldn't get up steps to see my daughter, things like that. It got me thinking, got me looking, and I haven't got adequate answers yet. It's going to take some time, I think, to talk to staff and find out what their data is. But it seems like more and more units, housing units, especially multi-family housing units, they're really tough on people with disabilities. Yeah, the townhomes is a good example. There were 15 steps up to my cement steps up to my daughter's door. No way can you do that when you can't walk. And if you there's no alternative way to get in either. That's the kicker. There's no other door. There's no elevator. There's not a dumbwaiter. There's not a big 500-pound guy or something out there to help you. You're just stuck, you know. And it's for and anyone who has a disability, a physical disability like that, or is a mother with young children, just even carrying the groceries in, if you don't have two people, it's a slog. Not that it, well, I'm not saying exercise isn't good, but when you can't do it and it makes it hardship, it's crazy. I want to know, I want to be reassured that these kinds of interests are being taken into account when plans are being made, and that they're fulfilled so that other people besides young, healthy people can live in them. That it really bothers me. So I'd like to suggest that as a possible topic.
I was killed off prematurely, which is why we're having this issue. This person killed me today before the meeting even ended. A little too efficient. Okay. Which is why we should have an SOP regarding account deactivations, right? Okay. Hopefully we can get Chuck to copy. Oh, good. So according to Chuck, he has pasted the link into chat. Paulina, you should have the document to be able to be printed out onto your local printer. So we will have a few copies for those in person. And then I just have to get Angus to give me access so I can actually access the voter list, check names against, and finish my job. Okay. She wait, I'll get even with you somehow for that one. Gee. Moral of the story is do not mess with IT guys. It, you sh- if it should, he sent it to your Livable Sunnyvale email, yes, so. Oh, did you send it to her Livable or to her personal? Well, click on the link in the chat, yeah. Well, it might end up having her fill it out rather than print it, but we'll see. So please do complete the form in the chat. Is it working correctly for those of you who are here? Okay. Because if you're running, you should be voting.
It's working for online.
Good. So for those of you who are, yes, you should vote for more than one. And the reason why there is no write-in option is that you actually have to formally announce your nomination. Yeah, she's just trying to access if you're not logged into Zoom, she's just trying to access the network printers for Sunnyvale Community Services to print out some wet ink copies. She's trying to print them out. Pauline is the only one that has access to Sunnyvale Community Services emails. I mean, printer network. Not yet. So did you click it on chat? Did you click on the chat? Oh, you're not logged into Zoom. Okay, you didn't check to see which, all right.
Maria, you on Zoom? Well, I don't know if we're getting the paper ballots. Oh, okay.
Worst comes to worst, you could borrow somebody's laptop who's on Zoom, click on the link and fill in your information.
Yeah.
Are you logged into the Zoom meeting? Then click on the link. It's in the chat.
Yeah. I can do it for other people.
Oh, no, you can only do it for yourself. You shouldn't do it for other people.
I changed their stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, then if Susan needs it, so.
Want to do that?
Yeah, if you click on the Zoom link, you should be able to fill in an email address other than your own.
So did I.
The document is in Drive, okay, and it's under, here, I'll show you the pathway. Nope, not my Drive, sorry, shared Drive. Livable Sunnyvale Board. Okay. Come here. You sure you got me back into the Livable Sunnyvale Board space? Okay, so but the problem is that it's a network printer, so you don't have access to their network printers. You're not going to be able to print anything, just like I can't print anything. Okay. So, so Paulina, did you find it in your other email? Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's fine. The chat didn't have, your chat didn't have the link? Oh, because you signed in after it was posted. That's why. Okay. No, no, Angus is, could you give Marie your laptop so she can click on the chat and vote? Oh, Paulina's got you? Okay.
I reposted it in the chat.
Sorry. So let me bring up the responses then.
Yes.
That's why I bring a USB mouse because I hate stuff. You're welcome. Okay, we're good then, I guess. Once we bring it forward. And this is the first time we're doing this sort of tally in the Livable Sunnyvale board space, so I don't know if it's going to function, but we're going to find out, aren't we? I'm loading responses, so we shall see. It's a, yeah, you check the box. You fill in the information on the form and then check the box. Okay, so I'm still getting loading responses. It says file unavailable for me, so maybe you can load the thing. I don't know why I'm still getting file unavailable. Maybe when you broke the, yeah. I am permanently banned from my files now. Okay. It's a good thing I finished the meeting minutes from the last board agenda meeting. Okay, so that's the responses so far? Okay. Looks pretty. I don't think we have any non-voters. At least don't vote. Check it against the membership list. General, do you have other responses? So you're going to see my email twice. Yeah, but you should have filled in her email. Did you not? Asking for passwords. Oh. Stuff that she couldn't remember. Okay. Yeah, it's not going to let you log in more than once. So I don't know why it was asking for passwords. So,
This is Margaret, so she's so good at digging.
okay. Oh, I see, because the name's there. Okay.
My
Technically, you should not be looking at this.
I'm supposed to help count the votes.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Hello?
Forgot. It's the
Angela
Angus thing. My brain is getting
Well,
like.
it's Angela, Agnes, and Angus, my dad.
So, it doesn't,
And everybody got voted back.
yeah, except,
Yeah, and actually, for those who are waiting on Zoom, they are going to tally up all of the vote results, and those should be done in several minutes or so.
Okay, so it's not a minimum number of people. All right, that's fine.
All right. So we're going to close the voting in 2 minutes, okay? And then we should be done with this.
Yeah, I guess. Broken, it would have to be reestablished. That's okay. But it just means that. Yeah, but it is live. It's live. It's live. Yeah. Yeah, so you'll have to find out what the story is. It's live. I mean, obviously, if I'm sitting here, I'm signed in. No, I sent an email out last night. I signed in last night. So I don't know why you believe this as opposed to me. Yeah, look, looks like, look, the admin signed in 5 months ago. I don't think so.
No, actually, that's not true.
Oh, okay. It's live. Okay, so let's just see the value.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to officially close voting. Okay. And we have a unanimous re-election of Chuck, Mike, and Angela. Congratulations. And that concludes my services because I don't have access to the drive anymore.
So thank you all. I will just say a thank you to Angus. He pulled off an amazing social on Saturday. I think there were over 100 people. We were about 100. I kid you not, these young people, I got there maybe quarter to 12. I left at 3:30 and there were probably still 30 people there. It was really nice. It was really good. Thank you for your service doing that. Thank you for all our coalition partners. It was, and we will do that again. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time and I hope you learned tonight and see you next month. Bye. Okay, that's it. Who ends the meeting? You?
Mike.
Oh, Mike does.